like buying a brand new boat today is, yeah, I mean, some of the Mastercrafts are 350 grand brand new. What percentage of new boats are done through financing?
So traditional financing is going to capture about a third. If you have a larger vessel that's yacht certified, you don't even register or title it at all. So there's a number of ways that banks will put their name per se on a vessel just to make sure that they have that retention where they could go and recoup their investment and repossess. It's a really rare instance that happens.
Can you write off boat loan on your taxes?
It depends. It depends how you're using it. I'm not a tax professional, but I'm sure there's plenty of guys that write their boats off.
Welcome to the Boaters Podcast. Today we are going to be hanging out with Dylan over at Float Finance, and this is going to be a really good episode today because most of you know I'm pretty cheap. I don't really like to finance stuff, and I drive around in a 22-year-old vehicle with 230,000 miles on it. So my questions are probably going to be pretty relevant to what you might be asking as well. But to get things started today, Dylan, what got you into boating, or how did you get into the boating industry?
So I actually come from a power sports background. I sold motorcycles, worked at motorcycle dealerships for a number of years. It was actually my first job. And I was always jealous of the guys that sold boat sales or the guys that sold boats because it looked so fun, it looked so cool. So I made my way into the boat sales world. More specifically, I got into a finance role at a relatively large dealership here in New Hampshire. And it kind of just it went up from there. I worked at a dealership for about 3 years and decided then to go out on my own and do financing independently.
Gotcha. So do you own a boat?
Yeah, I have a Mastercraft NXT 22 surf boat.
Oh, wow. That's a nice boat. Was that your first boat or is that number 27?
So before I got into boats, I was into vintage jet skis. I
Ah,
had I had some stand-ups. I had a couple Yamaha Super Jets. I had a Kawasaki 650SX, and most recently, I have three Kawasaki X2s that one's kind of turned into a parts unit, but I've got two good. I've got two good running skis. But this is my first boat that I've owned, the Mastercraft.
oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess working at a power sports dealer, you probably got deals and options available where someone came in and kind of had here's something that needs a little bit of work and all the mechanics. So it's kind of like, hey, yeah, we could do this, do that, and kind of get into it that way. That makes a lot of sense.
We used to buy derelict, jet skis for, I mean, really pennies on the dollar because the labor costs were so high to fix them that they would just say, "Hey, pay my service bill, pay the diagnostics fee, and you can have it." Which was
Wow.
awesome for us because we could work on it after hours or you name it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's kind of the same thing how I got a lot of my boats doing same thing working at a dealer, but I think jet ski is probably a little bit cheaper than most boats, especially a Mastercraft.
yeah, surf boats have gotten they've become very expensive in the last 3 or 4 years. The boat that I have now, I could have bought for roughly 40% less if I'd bought it in 2019.
Yeah. That's I mean, I've seen, well, it depends on how, what year, but like buying a brand new boat today is, yeah, I mean, some of the Mastercrafts are 350 grand brand new, uh,
Yeah.
which, which is pretty much my first question here is going to be, um, what percentage of new boats are done through financing?
So traditional financing is going to capture about a third. But overall, so when I say traditional financing, I mean like you go to a dealership and you arrange financing, or you call a guy like me and say, "Hey, I want to finance a boat." We're going to capture about a third. In some markets more, some markets left or less. But what's interesting is that 90% of boats are financed somewhere, whether it's someone pulling cash out of an investment fund or they're sourcing some sort of financing using personal assets as their backing. Uh,
Hmm.
Roughly 90%.
That's crazy. I mean, with the prices of today's boats, I could totally understand that number, but that is a very large number. I mean, like 90% is that's a high. How do you know how many people default on those loans? Like how many people lose their boat?
It's low. It's really low.
Really?
Um, yeah, I work with a bank up here out of Maine, and I mean they probably originate 1,000 loans a year, And the last time I spoke with their vice president, he said that they only defaulted, or there were only 3 loans that defaulted in the 2024 year. In
Really?
2024 as a whole, yeah, it's
Wow.
low.
Yeah, that is extremely low. I mean, but that's only 1 year. Is there a point in time where, say, 5 years, those numbers go up, or?
If you look back to 2008, 2009, those numbers were much higher.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
that's because the lending guidelines back then were much more lenient. Approval odds today, I would say, are similar to what they were back then, but banks are more stringent in terms of what they will allow. So if you
Mm,
don't fit in the criterion that their program is trying to fit, um, if you don't fit in their program, they won't lend the money. So whereas before there were a number of different ways to get around it, uh, they would they had a stack of addendums that you work your way through. Um, you could find a way to do it back then, whereas today it's very clean cut.
yeah, yeah. They're not just handing out, you get a boat, you get a boat, you get a boat, like Oprah.
Yeah, everyone gets a boat.
Yeah, that's too funny. That's too funny. Is it harder to get a boat loan, like, compared to, or is it pretty much, is it similar to like a car loan? Because I mean, that's another thing. I mean, there's so many. I wouldn't be surprised if 90% of cars out there were on a car loan too.
Yeah. Um, if you're looking at car loans in comparison to a boat loan, the best way to describe it is I use the analogy of if a car loan is on one end of the spectrum and a mortgage is on the other, a boat loan is approximately 90% of the way to a mortgage. Um, it's not quite as simple as a car loan, and it's nowhere near as complex as a mortgage, but it shares a lot of the same proponents as a mortgage in terms of the length of the loan. Um, it's it's very similar but very different.
Is it a hard process? Like, is it, how hard is it to get approved for a boat loan? It's like if car loans over here and pretty much anybody with a heartbeat can get a car loan, then if we're over to the other side with the boat loan, is it pretty easy to get pre-approved, or like how
I
difficult
would
is that?
I would say there's a few different tiers, right? So if you're financing less than $50,000, that's
Okay.
going to be a pretty easy loan. Uh, Specifically on boats that are newer than 10 years old, sometimes
Mm,
20, depends on the program. And then 50 to 150,000, that steps it up a notch. And then beyond $150,000, there are some intricacies over 150,000 in terms of what the bank will require. That's when they start asking for more income. They ask for more income-based stipulations, whereas anything less than that, generally speaking, it's very very clean cut. So under 150 grand is what they call a stated income, where you state your income. They might ask for proof of, well, what you're making, versus over 150. Sometimes they'll ask for financials.
mm. Like
Uh,
W-2s or a bank statement or something like that?
Yeah, they call them a personal financial statement.
Okay.
Basically, they just want to know what's going on, what your sort of financial portfolio looks like. But again, it depends on the bank. There's different programs. We typically try to put the customer with whatever lender is going to make the most sense.
So if it's closer to the mortgage side, like, I mean, depending on the mortgage that you get, some mortgages, like, some of them take a month, some of them take 2 months to get closed. How long does it generally take for, like, this whole process to go from, like?
Or well, actually, yeah, I want to ask that question, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe there's another way to ask it of like for homes you can get pre-approved or pre-qualified. So like there's a difference between approved and qualified. Is it similar to that when you're getting a boat loan?
We do a pre-approval. What we'll
Okay.
do is we'll generally speaking, you want to narrow your boat search down to one. Let's say you're looking at a boat and you say, "Hey, listen, I'm thinking about this. I just don't know if I qualify." What we'll do
Mm-hmm.
is we'll take your application and send it to the bank and say, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" And they'll either approve or deny, or they'll just issue a rate and a term, and you then you have you're locked and loaded. You could go and purchase that boat.
Oh wow. So it's pretty quick. I mean, like is that like 2 day process, 3 day?
So from start to finish, let's just say you want to buy a Boston Whaler 19 Montauk,
Mm-hmm.
80, $100,000 boat new. From start to finish, I could have your paperwork signed and the dealer paid in 3 days.
Well, that's good because I mean, boats are quick. Like they move quick. It's like so. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that's what I was thinking there. I was thinking, well, if it's closer to the mortgage side, I mean, that takes a long time to get all the stuff done. So it's kind of like, by the time you get all your documents, this, that, and the other thing, well, that boat's already sold now. So it's kind of like, well, can you get like this pre-qualified and then go shopping around and say like, I'm approved for X amount, and then now all of a sudden you can start shopping around based on your budget type of thing.
Yes and no. I mean, here's what I'll tell you is approvals are specific to the boat. So let's
Mm,
say you're approved on an $80,000 or $100,000 Boston Whaler, and you say, man, I really like that Robalo they have. Um, and it's the same price range. I would say the possibility of that approval extending to the other boat is like 99%
okay.
in most cases. It's like I said, it's an interesting world. We try to simplify down. You just make it as streamlined as possible for the customer, um, and just picking one boat makes it a little bit easier for you. But don't ever let that stop you from saying, you know what, I've sort of shifted gears. I want to
Hmm.
buy, I want to buy something else because a that's a real thing that happens, and that's a real thing that we deal with, and can execute on.
Yeah, because that's kind of something that I mean, I tell people that a lot whenever they're buying, like, talking about boats. So whenever you're buying a boat, to me, it's almost like I try to tell people don't get emotionally attached until you have it. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people could get emotional in the deal. So like, they pick this boat, but depending on the market and this time of the year, like, when you're buying a boat in June, they go a lot quicker than they do in December. So in June, it's kind of like a quick thing where you found this boat and then you go to try and get it financed. And then when you come back, the boat got sold to somebody else. It's kind of like, that's what I was really thinking about is I feel like that would be a pretty common scenario of, like you said, I'm looking at the Boston Whaler, but the Robalo is the same thing, or they got a different Whaler in, and it's got something else. It's got more horsepower. It's got a Seakeeper. It's got some kind of
Yeah.
amenity that makes it more appealing than the other one, and so how kind of like all flexible is that? I guess you'd say.
It's like I said before, it's approvals can be a little bit fluid. Um,
Yeah.
it's and interestingly, I actually run into that situation often in the late spring, early summer.
Oh
Someone's
yeah.
like, "We just came back from the dealership. We're thinking about it. We want to entertain our financing options." And
Mhm.
the first question I always ask is, "Did you leave a deposit?" Because
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yep.
sales is a crazy place. If it can happen, it will. And I've seen crazier things happen. And
Mhm.
even to your point exactly, someone's looking at a whaler, they leave, and then the dealership may take another boat in on trade between the time they left and the time they come in the next day. They're like, oh my God, that's the boat that I was looking for all along.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like I said, we can switch gears. It's not a hard thing to do. It's just a more streamlined process if they have an idea of what if they're ready to rock and roll, they've got a deposit on their boat. The only thing left for them to complete, to sort of like close the knot per se, is just to finance it. And that's where we come in.
Are there like different types of loans? Like, what are these? What types of loans are there? I know, depending on the item in boats, I don't really know this, but like, is there like a secured and an unsecured, or like a different that's gonna like one's gonna have a better rate than another one, or um, what's that? Those types look like?
So there is a company out there that does unsecured boat loans. It's basically a personal loan that's branded as a boat loan.
Okay.
With they call those unsecured lines of credit. Um, the rates are generally higher, but you do get a little bit more flexibility because they'll just wire the money directly to you, and now you have cash to buy whatever you want.
Mm.
Um, I haven't done a loan with them, but I know that that's how their program works. We only work with collateral based loans, which use the boat as the collateral.
Gotcha.
Um, those are generally cheaper. Well, not cheaper. The rate is more. There's more of a rate incentive to do that because there's less risk for the lender.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, they can say, "Hey, give us the boat back," and recoup some of their investment.
Right. Yeah.
So you always want to look for a loan type that is a collateral based loan type, because the savings are going to be on the rate and you're going to get a better term. So with I'm forgetting the name of the company that does it. Um, their term is limited, whereas with boat loans you can go out very far
Hmm.
in terms of length, like the length of the loan.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Like how long you got it.
Yeah,
And they just basically put a lien on the boat, or well, they're a what do they call it? Like, I mean,
it's a lien.
okay.
In depending on your state, so there's states that title boats and there's states that don't. And then there's also another layer to that if you have a larger vessel that's yacht certified, you don't even register or title it at all. You
Hmm.
just register it with the Coast Guard. Um, so there's a number of ways that banks will put their name per se on a vessel just to make sure that they have that retention where they could go and recoup their investment and repossess. But it's a really rare instance that happens.
Now that's pretty much all recreational use as far as like financing is mainly what we've been talking about. What about commercial use boats? Is there a big difference? Like if you're going to be using the boat commercially or recreationally, like is there a thing there?
Yeah, so there are commercial marine lending programs. I would say they're not common. They're not as commonly utilized compared
Hmm.
to they call it recreational lending is boat lending. Um, Generally speaking, a lot of this commercial lending is going to be private. So there's two main lending sources. You have your traditional bank. You go to I don't know, a Wells Fargo or whoever you bank with, maybe a credit union. And there's the other sector, which is the private sector. Um, Anything over, generally speaking, in the commercial setting, anything under $1 million is kind of it's like a gray area. It's a little bit difficult
Huh.
because some banks will lend to your business, but they say you can't use it for a boat. Whereas the private segment says, listen, we'll give you $1 million or more, um, and here's the rate. And they just want the collateral.
So you think that has to do with because of how how much the boat's going because obviously it's going to be depreciating pretty quickly, and so the value of something like a 10-year-old boat that is used recreationally with 800 hours on it versus a commercial boat that's got 10,000 hours on it and like is all clapped out, like I'm sure that has something to do with it. So I mean, I guess I understand that, but it also that kind of sucks for somebody to like, if you're a charter captain or something like that, or you want to start a charter business, because getting a loan for your business too isn't always the best terms, I guess you would say.
Yeah, business lending is tricky. 99.9% of my business is consumer financing.
Okay.
You're buying a boat from a dealership, or you're buying a boat from a friend. We can do both, whether you're buying from a dealership or you're buying we call them driveway to driveway. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't deal with a ton. Generally speaking, as the dollar amount increases, the volume goes down. I don't deal with a ton of that business type loan for vessels.
Mm.
There may be someone out there that does. We're not specialized in it,
Right.
um, but generally speaking, those types of loans are, SBAs or um, some sort of business loan, and it may not have like the marine, you know, affiliation to it, but it could be utilized for a boat.
Right. Right. Then can you write off a boat loan on your taxes? Like, is it considered a write off?
It depends. It depends how you're using it.
Yeah.
I'm not a tax professional, but I'm sure there's plenty of guys that write their boats off. I heard a story. If anyone listening has been to Lake Winnipesaukee, there's a guy up here that delivers pizza on his boat, which I'm sure
Really?
he writes it off. It's genius.
That is
Um,
genius.
it's
I,
it's not. It doesn't look like a pizza delivery boat, but it does deliver pizza.
wow. I didn't even think of, yeah, you got your boat like I do Uber on the water.
Yeah.
Hey, that could be a thing. That could be a thing. Like, like depending on where you live, like if you live on a lake or an area where there's restaurants and all that stuff, I didn't even think about there you go. There's a business idea for you.
Yeah, there's some restaurants in this area that there's a number of public docks on this lake, and there's a number of restaurants in close proximity to those docks, and they'll deliver right to the docks. You just pull up, grab a pizza, and you're out.
Wow, that's perfect.
It's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like it's right because that's one thing. Everybody's out. You're out on the water all day long. Like you get hungry, so if you didn't pack the cooler or you ate all the snacks, like you want to get something somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. There's plenty of ice cream boats too. They pull up to the sandbars. I'm pretty
Really?
sure they have those everywhere though.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you're at, like in a big sandbar area down here, they'll have like different places. It's usually more like drink related and like snack related stuff like that. But yeah, ice cream on the water. Um,
It hits.
yeah, it must. I'm just trying to think of like a place, one that I've been to that I could think of, and I'm sure in Miami or probably Crab Island and Destin has stuff like that, but nowhere. I can't think of anywhere in the Keys. Maybe Key West. I don't know. Then, how long do you usually see a boat loan go for? Like how long are those terms usually go for?
So the boat the marine lending program is broken into segments.
Okay.
And the segments are based off of the value of which you're trying to, or they're based off of how much you're borrowing. So from 10,000 is the minimum, 10,000 to $25,000. The maximum term that any bank will offer is 144 months or 12 years. And then
12
from
years.
$25,001 to $50,000, the maximum term is 180 months or 15 years. And then anything beyond $50,000, the maximum is 20 years or 240 months.
Wow.
So you can go out pretty far. And here's what I'll tell you though. I field a ton of calls, and I get guys that call me and say, I'm financing 55 grand and I want the longest term you have. And I say, oh, okay. Can I show you what a slightly shorter term would look like in terms of payment? And it's interesting because, $55,000 over 20 years, 15 years is really not that much more expensive. And you end up paying the amount of interest you end up paying is significantly less. So I won't advise them. I'll just show them. When you're in that like $50,000 to $100,000 price point, and you want the maximum term, take a look at what a shorter term will do for you, because you're going to pay off the boat significantly faster, and the interest is going to be significantly less.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine having a $100,000 boat loan for 20 years. Like that's what do you end up paying on that? Like, I mean, I know obviously, well, I'll ask you about rates in a minute, but like what would be a normal rate for something like that?
So the more you finance, generally speaking, the cheaper it is. And that's for anything.
Yeah.
You can finance 12 million bucks at low sixes right now. But if you wanted to finance, if you wanted to do a personal loan for $5,000, you're going to pay 13%.
Wow.
The interest amount on 20 years, depending on the rate, is close to what you pay for the boat if you see the loan through its entirety.
Yeah.
The average maturity of a marine loan is much shorter than 20 years. And the average length of boat ownership is significantly less than 20 years. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, if people don't have boats for that long, I mean, well,
I would
don't. I mean,
say, I would say the number of people in terms of a percentage that get a 20-year loan on their boat and actually see it through to the end is less than 1%.
Wow.
But the average maturity, so that the average time that people hold a 20-year loan for is only 3.2 years.
So usually everybody is only within a couple of years. That's what they're doing. They're getting a 3-4 year loan based on that. Because yeah, if you borrowed 100 grand and then ran that thing out and paid 200 grand for a boat, in 20 years, that boat's going to be worth 40. So
yeah, boats how do I say this nicely? But boats depreciate fast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
unless you buy them leftover, 1 year old, the biggest hits that first year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. The average length of ownership is only 7 years.
Really?
And
That was what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask about like, how do you know how long people usually hold on to a boat?
yeah, it's 7 years. That's the national average.
Wow.
There are areas where that number is lower. There's areas where that number is higher. Um, I mean, you look at some of these, very wealthy lake towns.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's trying to keep up with each other. I would say some towns it's closer to 2 years. They want
Wow.
what's brightest and what's the best and the coolest color and foot heaters and heated seats and
Oh my
they
goodness.
want it all. So yeah, the bright side of that is that there's a ton of late model used boats right now as a result of that, where you can save a ton of money and get a relatively like a late model boat for sometimes 40% of what it would have cost to the original purchaser.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. That's more my style. I'd be more out there like, you know, the way around it, like, I'm gonna wrap the boat every year, like for like that, a couple $100 or $1,000, just put a new wrap on the boat, and like it's a brand new boat. No one's gonna know. Just change the graphics.
Yeah, there's some guys up here that wrap boats. I wouldn't say it's weird. The difference in style from New England to Florida
Mm-hmm.
is incredibly different.
Yeah.
I remember in verbatim we had a customer that was buying a Boston Whaler 240 Outrage from us, and Boston Whaler at the time had 5 or so colors. It was like white, gray. Uh, they had like this sort of like slate blue color. Then they
Yeah.
had
Yeah. I
that.
remember that one. Yep.
Then they had the seafoam, and I forget what the last color was. And he was so close to buying the seafoam, which I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He ended up just getting white. And his reasoning was, he goes, "Seafoam is a Florida boat." That's all he said. There's none up here. There's no seafoam colored boats. It's white,
Really?
blue. Yeah, white, blue. There's some gray boats, and then there's like some really bright surfing boats, but it's really basic. On Lake
Hmm.
Winnipesaukee, I'd say the most common color combination is navy blue hull side, red boot stripe, white hull bottom.
Wow. Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
all you see.
seafoams. Yeah, that's everywhere down here. I mean, but
Yeah.
we also got a lot of everything because wrapping's kind of a thing too. We'll go from the seafoam to the blues to the yellows to the oranges to the reds to the like um black whatever. But well, you got a lot more wake stuff up there too. So those can get pretty colorful too. Like Centurions or Malibus or Mastercrafts or Teagues or whatever. You see a lot of that, metallic and like all the
Yep.
different color schemes with all the cushions and stuff. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a splash of color.
What's interesting is the colors. I mean, at least in my time in the business, they come and go, but it's a revolving door. Like the colors that we are phasing ourselves out of, which are like the bright high vis colors,
Mm-hmm.
the 3 color accent interiors, the really bright bold colors, were very common in the 80s as well. And now we're
Yeah.
going back to the grays, the blues, which were those are timeless colors, but
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked in 20 years if they're back.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that too. But I mean, wrapping kind of also threw itself in there because there's a lot of people that wrap boats in the beginning just to like protect the hull, and also so you can change out that color because I mean, a lot of people also look at the resale value of the boat. So it's kind of like, well, white's going to sell a lot easier than like you're saying. If I got this bright lime green with an orange pinstripe down the side, like colored boat, it's gonna, you need that person that's got the acquired taste for that to want to buy that boat. So
Yeah, and I've learned my lesson on that because in 2023, Army Green was the trend. Everyone wanted Army Green. In
yeah.
the years before that, Army green was really popular in the auto segment. Like Toyota had that army green color. Everyone started coming out with green cars, like that sort of like military green.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought an army green Mastercraft with a tan interior. I'm like, oh, this is super cool. Well, not that those colors will ever leave, but they're not as in demand right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah, but that's a personal preference because I like that too. I mean, I like that look, that the like matte army green, the tan
Yeah.
cushions and like some black accents. Like I think that looks, I like that really clean. Now the what I've seen a lot lately is everybody wants black stuff. Everything people want blacked out, like and then there's the ones in automotive and stuff where they do that, like the primer black, the like you know
Satin.
yeah, like it's ready for paint, but that's the color I want. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
like but black is, I mean, everybody wants the acrylic dashes that are black. They want the black
yeah,
powder coating on the T tops, like
yeah.
um which I guess depending on where you live, but you got to have shade on that stuff. Like, I mean, it looks cool,
It
yeah,
gets hot.
but
It gets
yeah,
really hot.
yeah.
And it's interesting too. Different markets. So we finance all over the U.S. and we get to see pictures of all the boats that we're financing. Uh, Different markets. It's crazy. Like what colors are really popular in like Texas or like for instance California
Mm-hmm.
aren't as well reciprocated on the East Coast. And
Really?
it's interesting. Yeah, culturally, people just want different. They have different tastes over there. Like right now in California, what's really hot is they like the sort of slate gray, and
Oh.
that like ultra dark maroon interior. It actually
Hmm.
looks really cool. Whereas in Texas, you see a lot of like red fishing boats with flake, and then you get up here, it's blue, very classic colors, and then you get to Florida, and it's all the bright kind of seafoamy colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really cool to see.
I've always seen the flake stuff more like, to me it's always like that's like more bass boat type stuff. You see a lot more boats doing that metal flake type thing on their boats now, like the wake boats, surf boats, stuff like that. But I've always seen that as like, that's like a bass boat thing, not like a center console bow rider. Like you ain't gonna see a metal flake Boston whaler, like, but maybe you will. I don't know.
Boston Whaler is this is just my experience working with them, is they stick to what they know,
Yeah.
and they don't really deviate much from it. They do one thing really well, and they make really fantastic fishing boats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The issue with flake, I don't know if you've ever like seen a repair done on a flake boat. It's incredibly difficult.
Oh, I
Uh,
bet. I bet.
and I'll tell you why. We had a surf boat, and this is when I learned about this. We had a surf boat, and there was some damage to the port side, midship, and it dug into the flake. So we said, okay, great, we're going to send it to someone to replace it or to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Got to the fiberglass shop, and they said, listen, we can't just fix the affected area because we don't. It's going to be obvious that we fixed it. First off, it's hard to blend,
Yeah.
and second off, flake will look different on a boat depending on which person sprays it. Because you think about someone holding a spray gun,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to move their arm differently. The flake's going to lay differently.
Yeah.
And we actually had this boat repaired, and during the repair process, it with flake is your color, so you just have a clear like basically gel that goes over top of it.
Mm-hmm.
If it hardens too fast, it won't be as clear, and if it hardens too quick, it never gets like it never gets hard. It just gets kind of tacky.
Wow.
So flake is incredibly difficult to fix.
Yeah, I figured it would. I mean, I'm thinking how difficult it is just to color match stuff. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
paint's one
yeah,
thing. Paint is I think there's a lot more flexibility and give in paint, whereas gel coat and like flake, it's like that's a very, you know, one to people that can do that are very good. Like they're very good.
absolutely.
They know exactly how to mix and match and all that stuff to get really good at color matching and then like blending like a flake paint, like that's or whatever it is. That's that's definitely a skill for sure.
Oh, 100%. It's Florida is basically like the gel coat capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I have a guy up here that just bought a concept. I think it was a center console. Yeah, center console concept. And before he bought it in Florida, and before he had it brought up, he's like, I made sure that the gel coat was fixed in Florida because it's so prevalent. Florida's the boaters capital of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's all I know is gel coat. I mean, I know paint to a point. I'm not a
Mm.
fiberglass guy or anything. It's not like I know these things, but over the years, all the projects that I've done, like that's what I know more is doing gel coat and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely we don't well same thing for like aluminum. We don't have a lot of aluminum boats down here. That's
That's a
northwest
Canadian
type
thing.
stuff. Yeah, Canadian,
Canadian or
Seattle,
West Coast,
Washington.
British Columbia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all that stuff.
Have
So
you seen the Jasper Marine boats? Have you checked those out?
I have not. I have not seen those.
Super cool.
Are they?
Super cool. Yeah. I've never been a big fan of aluminum boats, but Jasper Marine, the guys from like New Zealand, and I read the bio on their website, and he did, he was in shipbuilding or something similar in New Zealand, and he's started building his own boats. If we're talking about like if we're relating this boat to like the automotive segment, their boat is like a overland Toyota Tacoma on the water. It's
Mm,
so cool. And they put twins on them. They're like 24 feet long. I can't remember off the top of my head, but definitely check those out if I was just I'm jealous every time I see them post a reel. I'm like I want one of these boats.
that's funny. Yeah, the rates. What is a normal rate right now? And obviously, I'm sure based on the amount you're getting, and like, let's do the 150 mark because you said that's pretty much it. Like, if you're above 150 or below 150, like, what's normal for being below 150,000 as far as a rate goes?
So with those rate tiers with the term tiers we talked about earlier, you know, under 150,000 you can expect rates between 7 and 8% right now.
Okay.
There are a number of factors that play into rate, right? Um, and I'll sort of hypothesize these. It Cash down is one factor, credit score is another factor,
Okay.
and the value of the boat is another factor. So, like for instance, if you're buying a boat and it's only worth 70 and you're paying 85 for it, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. You may end up having a higher rate because there's more risk. It all falls
Right.
back to risk.
Right.
So yeah, under 150, you're going to be between 7 and 8%. In the eights, it's between sevens or eights. Over 150, you're starting to dip into the sixes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not as horrible as everyone thinks.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how like you said earlier is the more money you borrow, the better your rate gets, and the less money you borrow, the higher your rate gets. It's almost like your credit
Yeah,
score. Like, the
yeah.
more debt you have and the more payments you owe other people, the better your credit score is versus like if you don't have any debt and you don't owe anybody any money, you're not going to have a really good credit score. It's like it's almost in your mind it feels like it's backwards.
Well, think about it this way: it costs the bank the same amount of money to process a loan, whether it's
Mhm.
25,000 or if it's 300,000.
Right.
It takes roughly the same amount of time for them. So, just using basic math here, if that cost is the same for 25 grand versus 300 grand, the rate's going to be the differentiating factor. That's going to be your delta.
Now, you said something about the credit score. What's the minimum credit score you got to have to get a boat loan? Is there like a floor and a
Yeah. Um, so marine lending, or really any lending, is broken into two segments. You have prime, which is above 680 credit score, and you have subprime, which is below 680.
okay.
Generally speaking, the floor is going to be around 600, but every situation is different. Um, you know, let's just say, I don't know, someone's a 605 and they've got, that's their credit score. It is what it is, but they've got good income and maybe they had a little bit of a rough pass, but the last 5 or 6 years have looked really good. They're probably going to qualify depending on how much they're lending. If they want to borrow $2 million, I would say the chances of that are low. But let's say they're looking, let's say
Yeah.
they're looking at an $80,000 boat. I mean, that's easy. We just need to make sure that the bank hears the full story. Um,
Right.
Banks, they want to lend, they want to help. but only if it makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean that's how they make money. They lend money to make money. Like
Yeah.
they take your money in, then they lend it out, and that's kind of how the bank operates. What